Speaking of which, so apparently the RAM companies are facing a class action lawsuit and are accused of price rigging and cartel behavior. Apparently that's what they're doing right now. If this actually becomes true in general, we'll see what kind of stuff on grounds or so for them to know, to see what kind of evidence that backs it up specifically. So I'm super curious, because if this is true or so, hopefully they'll bring down the prices for RAM in general. So it'd be really nice, because then I can finally pick up the RAM that I need for my for the build of the computer, and then I can finally multi-stream. Crossing my fingers, hopefully it is, but well, let's take a look and see what Yang Ye has to say about the actual situation itself.
It doesn't take a genius to figure out that there's something seriously wrong with the current landscape of DRAM and computing electronics. The fact that basically three companies have this much control over the economics of electronics, which are essential for modern society, and the fact that they can just start to appeal to AI companies and kind of send all their RAM that way and fuck everyone else over, just because those companies stand to profit that much more from giving AI companies and those building data centers and whatnot what they want. You know, that is just not an environment that feels fair, and it's just incredibly shady that such an occurrence can even happen. The power dynamics involved there, and just how much power these companies hold in the current economic landscape, is just something that should not be allowed. And that is why recently we've been seeing legal action, finally, against the top three RAM companies who have capitulated to this AI RAM apocalypse bubble hype and this gold rush towards AI dominance that is incredibly profitable for makers of, DRAM, and for makers of, GPUs and the like. And so right here, we have a class action lawsuit being issued against Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron. These three companies are the top three makers of RAM. Combined together, these three companies control 90% of the world supply of RAM. And RAM isn't just some luxury. RAM is actually essential for a lot of the technology that we use today that are essential, that we use to, live about our day-to-day lives. And everything in this day and age is a smart device. Your car is now a smart device. And obviously smartphones and computers and those kinds of daily usage electronics are also pivotal to just you being able to live in the current modern day society. Your fridge can be a smart device now, so on and so forth. All of it has some kind of RAM component in it. All of them do require these computing components that are being hoarded by artificial intelligence, and that the companies who control these components are deciding to prioritize corporations over consumers. And that's the thing to note about the DRAM apocalypse. Of course, gamers have been feeling the effects of it with price increases for consoles like a Nintendo Switch and
It's just like the one thing. Okay, so the one thing that always that I had a curiosity or so, right? I remember when what's his face or so closed down the what is it, the AI video shit? I forgot which one it is in general that did it, right? I remember that there was no actual no transaction actually happened or so for the RAM stuff. And it was basically a signed piece of paper that I want to buy, that I want to buy RAM in general, but not really confirming the purchase. So you expect that all the RAM that was basically allocated to that to that specific proposition, right, was going to be back to the normal consumer side, but apparently not, That's what I was expecting anyways, because I assumed they were probably reserving specifically when you're doing a deal or something like that. I don't know how business is, right? But I assume that's how it was, right? They reserved a shit ton of RAM specifically for them, and then the deal fell through, and I would expect that they had a shit ton of stock in the background with that one at least.
PlayStation and
That's
Xbox.
just me,
The
though.
Xbox Series consoles just saw their third price increase. The Steam Machine just got announced, and its price is hundreds of dollars more than it originally was intended to be. The Steam Deck recently increased in price by $300, so on and so forth. But it goes beyond gaming, which is technically more of a luxury or more of an entertainment product than something that is essential. even the more essential products are starting to see this kind of price increase that is becoming economically not viable for your average Joe. It is very clear that something about this is not right. It is very clear that the fact that the system can be gamed in such a way where three companies can stand to make that much profit from screwing over
That's
basically
crazy.
most of the world and only appealing to a select few companies who are building a technology that is ethically questionable, that has been proven to be destructive in many ways, both economically and just like in with the environment and everything, on top of all the like morally questionable elements surrounding not only the usage and the implementation of that technology, but the way it's being like built and the way there's a gold rush towards it. You know, it's kind of like building AI at all costs. All of that is incredibly shady, which is why this class action lawsuit comes as something that a lot of people have expressed a lot of support over. And it's something that's detailed here
That's good,
in this
actually.
Kotaku article titled Class Action Lawsuit Accuses the Three Largest RAM Manufacturers of Colluding to Drive Up Prices, referring to Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron. We're talking about 17 individual plaintiffs, including three small businesses who have launched a class action lawsuit in the Northern District of California against the three largest RAM and chip manufacturers in the world. And the plaintiffs allege that the three
I'm just surprised it's coming out of California, to be honest.
tech companies are colluding to raise the prices of RAM by keeping supplies artificially low, blaming it all on the AI data center driven RAM apocalypse rather than corporate policy. They're essentially being accused of using the proliferation of AI as an excuse to engage in the kind of business that they're engaging in. They're basically going, hey, our hands are tied. This is where the demand's at, so we got to like go there. And you know, with AI being pushed as this like essential technology and the next
I
big
bet you $10 the RAM that I have specifically in mine, and probably the RAM that well, not really the RAM or so, but like the shit that I have in that one, because I did bought a pre-built computer, right? But the problem is I could only afford the 32 gig, right? The problem is I need 64 gigs for a stable like computing stuff and everything like that. So, but unfortunately, yours truly, I'm gonna need more because I mess with After Effects and Adobe Photoshop and like other shit in general that I'm gonna be getting into. Well, I actually have been getting into, but the problem is, 64 gigs was killing my computer, to be honest.
like industrial revolution for the world. They're like, we gotta support this technology or whatever, and screwing over consumers along the way. But they're using AI as like a cover for what is essentially just a profit-driven venture. It's not about what they need or don't
I
need.
remember it wasn't AI when this initially started. Wasn't it technically the tariffs that actually started this stupid thing? I remember that's how it all started, didn't it? And then afterwards it became that. Like I remember when prices went up or so because of the whole quote unquote tariffs that was going on or so. And then after that, it was the AI afterwards.
To do. It's just about what they actually want to do, which is make the most money possible. And the way they do that is by focusing on AI at the expense of like the rest of the world. The plaintiffs are accusing Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron of essentially being a part of a cartel that is collaborating to inflate DRAM and chip prices by controlling the overwhelming majority of the market. While proving that will obviously be harder than alleging it, it's no secret that the three companies own roughly 90% of the DRAM market, Kotaku highlights here. And this all actually aligns with previous legal actions taken against companies like Samsung and SK Hynix when they were indicted back in 2005 and they were accused by a San Francisco jury for DRAM price fixing and bid rigging. Now, this was back in 2005, but Kotaku highlights here that a recent comment from Valve actually highlights that something similar is going on today in 2026.
Oh,
It is highlighted right here. If bid rigging sounds familiar to you, that's because a Valve employee stated that RAM manufacturers essentially blacklisted the company for attempting to negotiate on RAM prices during the Steam Machine's manufacturing process. There's the exact quote from this Valve.
oh, That's interesting what I'm hearing right there. That's kind of a little bit sus, I'm not gonna lie, to be honest.
employee, quote, look, there is no contracts, there's nothing. Like those guys, they give us a price every month or something, and they say you can buy that many, and it's yes or no. And if we say no, then they never talk to us again. This is information that comes from an interview
Man,
that
that's hella
YouTuber
cartel
Gamers Nexus
behavior.
did
Jesus
with this Valve
Christ.
employee. And yeah, it's something that's making a lot of headlines because that is shady AF. This feels like how like drug deals are handled. It's like cash up front, you take the deal, or like you're out and we never speak with you again and you never get to engage in business with us
That's
again.
kind of
Like you
weird.
just take the deal
That's
you're
pretty
given because
fucking
we have
weird,
the control,
dude.
we have the power, and we know you want the product. We know how essential it is for you to have our product. So the power belongs to us. You have no negotiating power. We'll give you a price. You say yes or no. And if you say no, then like never work with us again. So that further incentivizes companies who need that RAM to just say yes to whatever price point is presented, as unreasonable as it might be. I mean, the freaking lack of contracts and stuff like that, how unofficial this all is. Again, it very much is like a cartel. It feels like drug deals are happening for RAM, basically. That glimpse that Valve provided behind the scenes provides a lot of legitimacy to the argument that the plaintiffs are making here. And furthermore, the plaintiffs accuse the three manufacturing giants for using the ever-growing need to supply AI data centers with DRAM and chips as cover for their collusion. Publicly, they're saying that this is essentially just doing business with companies who, need the product that they're supplying, and it's all about supplying components for a technology that will be an essential part of our future. But AI so far has proven to be woefully unreliable, and it's also a technology that is controversial for the world at large, where a lot of people don't see the benefits outweighing all of the cons surrounding the technology, its implementation, its destructive nature, and its ethical quandaries. And then on top of everything, when you look at the stock price increase for these companies like Micron seeing an increase in stock price of 1,309%, and SK Hynix seeing a stock price increase of 2,045% over the past 5 years. I mean, and most of this happening in the last year. It is not hard to see why all of this looks so incredibly shady. I mean, companies becoming this rich this quickly and taking advantage of a financial crisis, essentially, by having all of the power because of the high in demand product that is an essential part of our modern day society and the technology that we need in this day and age to just function on a basic level. The power that they're exerting over having that much ownership over this market and supplying all of that to AI companies and letting everyone else kind of bite the dust. And
yeah, personally, I don't hate AI. Like I use it on a daily tasks or so when I need stuff done. In general, right? I'm like, it wouldn't surprise me if these people are actually manipulating the market in general. Would not surprise me. Just like what other people have said. They did this shit back in the 2000s, and history is just repeating itself, So, I'm like, honestly, like I said, I didn't know anything about during the dot-com boom era, so that's a little bit out of my expertise, right? Um, because like I said, I never had the internet, so never had a computer back then or so. Poor life. Um, but this is very interesting. If they do manage to find hard proof evidence that they have actually been manipulating the market in general, because it is kind of sus in general, especially that specific quote that they told to Valve themselves. It is a little bit like, And also on top of that, these companies getting rich and getting a shit ton of increased stocks or so is kind of like, well, maybe we should probably look into that, in my personal opinion. It seems kind of a little bit sus in general there.
just kind of making riches that way, it's just,
Extra riches,
I
I
mean, all
guess.
kinds of messed up. And yeah, this is something that's already garnered a lot of traction. Dexerto's report here already garnering tons of interactions and a lot of support for these companies, like seeing some kind of justice or seeing some kind of consequence for something that shouldn't be possible, right? If things were actually just in the world, this should not be a thing that should ever be a possibility. The fact that the laws allow for this to happen is crazy. And so hopefully there's a class action lawsuit that can kind of bring them down a peg. But yeah, people talking about how this is exactly why everything costs a fortune now. These RAM giants collude to choke normal supply, shove everything into AI, and jack up prices while we scramble for scraps. Greedy cartel behavior killing the consumer market. This is just such an egregiously rigged system and situation, and really highlights that no three companies, no three entities should have this much control over the entire economic landscape of components that are as essential as they are in this day and age. Now, class action lawsuits, they are a multi-year process. I wouldn't expect results anytime soon. I would expect that RAM prices will continue to go up as potential legal litigations, take their long time to kind of go through their natural process. Things are not going to get better anytime soon. Microsoft recently came out, Ashish Sharma recently came out from Xbox and talked about how, prices have already gone up by an average of 2.5 times since the Xbox Series launched. And she expects that by fall of 2027 or by end of 2027, we'll see those prices double yet again in terms of those
Bullshit,
computing
dude.
components. So price increases for not just gaming, but for essential electronics as a whole. Like, it's
If that shit doubles at the end of 2027, I better buy some of the shit that I need to buy before everything gets doubled at least, I think the thing that I want to get the most or so at least is a handheld, at least on my chopping block list. So I'm just saying.
just the beginning, folks. And we all have AI to blame for that. And alongside that, of course, the companies who are actually like enabling this bullshit, including Samsung and SK Hynix and Micron, who, yeah, because of the riches that they stand to make, they're willing to kind of go along with this incredibly shady and exploitative system and situation. As long as they get to make the money, it doesn't matter who gets to suffer for it, because they don't have the general public's interest in mind, despite the fact that the function that they serve as the top three biggest RAM manufacturers, like, very much is something that the public is heavily dependent on in terms of those companies kind of serving their products in goodwill. And that is not what's happening right now with the way they're giving into greed and they're giving into the gold rush of AI because of just the sheer amount of money that they stand to make. And it's just about seeing those numbers go up, even if it means like just destroying the world economy along the way, especially where computing
The only
electronics.
criticism I have about AI in general is the Americans' AI, where they think bigger is always better, but then you look at China's AI, smaller and efficient is better. You know, I've noticed that. I lean towards more of a when it comes to like efficiency work. When it comes to that, is the Chinese AI a lot more compared to compared to the other one, right? But it's still kind of funny in general to see that like the difference in like which one is superior, because if I remember correctly, China's AI is just superior than the American ones. So that's about it. AI is one massive dumpster fire. It's gonna collapse under its own weight. But I'm just saying, it's America's fault at the end of the day. Hey Shido, that's just America's efficient is never a thing. That is very true. America has never been a good thing when it comes to efficiency. To be frankly honest, they always frankly think everything bigger is always better. They always have that specific mentality. Always, always, always. That's why they've been sucking up all the RAM, because they want to make a bigger infrastructure to become better or so. But bigger is just not always better all the time,
Are
That's like
concerned.
my criticism.
So, hopefully all of this goes through. I can't sit here and say that I'm confident that these companies will be taken down by this class action lawsuit. But, at the same time, those arguments are certainly compelling. And with recent occurrences like Valve talking about how shadily they had to make deals for RAM, again, almost like it is like a cartel that, they aren't even signing contracts. They're just saying, we have a price point, take it or leave it or get fucked, kind of a thing. It's all
That's
very,
wild.
very like no way this can be above board. No way, or at the very least, even if by the current letter of the law, it's technically above board, it cannot continue this way. This cannot be
No,
allowed,
it
because
cannot.
otherwise, there's just no hope of the market recovering, and it's gonna fuck all of us over quite significantly in the long term. I mean, we're already seeing some of the effects of that outside of gaming, like with Apple recently announcing that MacBooks and iPads increasing by 20% due to memory crunch. This happened just
No one cares. Sorry, I just don't care about Apple. I don't really. I'm more of an Android person. I don't really care about Apple. I don't. No, it was not lost. Okay, sorry, Apple. No one really cares. Okay, all right.
effective immediately on June 25th, 2026. and Apple being one of the biggest brands in the world, like, yeah, that's gonna, and so many people being reliant on the Apple ecosystem,
I only
this is
use you
gonna
for
put a
one thing
huge
and one thing
damper
alone.
on people whose salaries certainly haven't matched the rate at which prices are increasing. So, where does this leave the rest of us, right? It's fucked, is what it is. So time will tell how all this pans out, but at the very least, there's some precedence of people actually realizing how messed up this all is and taking some kind of action, and hopefully those kinds of actions continue to increase and build up over time, so that we're able to do something about this, because this cannot stand. Or at the very least, that's one man's take. I'd love to hear what your thoughts and opinions are on the
If it
current.
does actually double at the end of 2027, fuck, dude, you better all those people better start buying what they need to buy almost immediately, or you're completely fucked at this point, you know? I'm like, I suggest if you guys been holding on buying a pre-built computer, you should probably pull the trigger at least as soon as possible. If this is true, if the prediction becomes true, and at the end of 2027 they double the prices on things, don't start crying or so afterwards that I didn't get the chance to buy the thingy thing. They give you at least like what, almost like 2 years or so until this happens. But we'll see, you know. I hate the fact that the 64 gigabyte RAM with RGB that I could afford back in the day, but didn't buy it due to fear of wasting, are now 5 times more, 4 times the old prices. Yeah, that's the thing itself. I'm like, at this point, you might as well just start pulling on triggers when you see a good deal. At this point, you know, that's all I can basically suggest now. You know, if you see something that's a really good deal, I suggest you pick it up immediately. For me specifically, I have the mentality of always waiting, because that's just kind of like how I am at the end of the day. You know, I always wait, but I guess now in this day and age I have to like get that mindset out of me to in order for me to like, might as well pull the trigger now. So but yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, anyways, that's the end of the video. You guys can comment, like, subscribe, do all that fancy jazzy stuff. If this becomes true and they do find them, all three of the big RAM companies actually colluding with each other and actually manipulating the marketplace with their RAM fucking inflation, well, at least we know who was behind the entire thing. So, but yeah. Anyways, that's the end of the video. And just crossing my fingers, hopefully this becomes to fruition and they get the actual slap across the face that they need to, because it is kind of sus, I'm not gonna lie though, because I remember this all started because of the whole tariff thing, and then it kept getting worse and worse and worse. So yeah, anyways, that's the end of the video, and peace.